Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Happy Thursday, everybody, and welcome into GC Live Afternoon Drive. I am Mike Yuva, and I want to apologize to everyone who usually tunes in for 2 o'clock. And judging by the number of people that are watching right now, as we kick off this show, there's been a good amount of you waiting. So apologies for the delay. But as Craig points out, Craig says, I have Beamer notifications on, so when he tweets, I get it immediately. And for those of you who may have just missed it, we have a new welcome home from Shane Beamer. And if you've been paying attention to what I've been saying on Twitter the last couple hours, kind of hinted that there was a massive one on the way. Now there's two. There's two new welcome home commits. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to do my best to get everyone caught up to speed on what's going on the best we can, as we do our best not to share. Thank you, Craig, talking about the suit. That's how you know commitment videos are going on. We got the suit going on. I got about 8 other ones I've worn within the last 3 days because of all these welcome homes from Beamer. We're going to do our best to share what's going on without giving the players away, because that's just how we do it at Gamecock Central, unless they specifically say, hey, all right, you can go ahead and say something. We're gonna honor their wishes. So having said that, we have a lot to get into today as far as what South Carolina has been able to do since the beginning of the week. When we did Tuesday nights, GC Live Talking Tuesdays, USC started to generate a wave of momentum in the transfer portal. But what they have been able to do since then, I mean, my goodness. And again, we haven't even announced these two ones that Shane Beamer had welcome home tweets within the last hour, 2 hours. Great additions, and the additions they've already had leading up to this point has put the Gamecocks at number 8 on the On3 transfer portal rankings. And that's important to keep in mind, simply because when you look at what South Carolina has lost this offseason, I think so many people get caught up in that number, right? 16 scholarship players, 18 overall. And as I've mentioned before, no one is sitting here acting naive and saying, man, losing a guy like Juice Wells, which, by the way, some of you have seen probably some of the stuff I've posted on social media, as well as the insider forum on Gamecock Central. I will get into the rumors about Juice Wells. I've shared this today on Sirius XM, SEC Radio, with former Gamecock alum of GC Live, of Gamecock Central, Alyssa Lang, as well as Chris Doring, but we'll get into that as well. But what USC is trying to do is, it's difficult to replace a talent like that. And I don't even know if they'll be able to actually do it with one player. Having said that, what USC has been able to accomplish in the transfer portal with their wide receiver room, because it's so young, it's so inexperienced, your two most productive wide receivers from last year. Luke Doty's number 1. He had 13 receptions. Number 2 is Nicholas Harbor. He had 12. So you have a lot of uncertainty in that room, and being able to add some of the pieces they've had with the wide receivers, they've been able to pick up over the last couple of days in the transfer portal. It should certainly make you feel better. But at the same time, too, this team needs still to fill many, many gaps, not just from an offensive standpoint, but defensive standpoint as well. Before we keep getting the show rolling, just want to give people a heads up. Because of the 2 welcome homes that have took place over the last 2 hours, Intern Joe is on standby. He might have to fill in for me for just a little bit, simply because I might have to go and take care of one of the welcome homes. We try to do our best with having these videos ready to go, but sometimes there's a surprise. So I don't want to get people too excited on one of these. And I'm not trying to be, a jerk and kind of just dangle a carrot in front of you, but there's a good one coming South Carolina's way. 2 good ones, but one in particular that I think is really going to excite Gamecock fans. Having said all that, if you guys have questions, let us know. Fire away on the message side of things, whether you're watching on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, wherever. We appreciate everyone who tunes in. Clint, do you do the video? Mike, I do the video. Just simple things. Got the laptop in front of me, got the microphone here, do it in the office. So that's where we do everything. And going back to my TV days, editing is something that I'm pretty good at. So, having said all that, what do we got here? Yoda says, let's go. Brian says, welcome home. Will said that's 2. That is 2. So right now where South Carolina is at this point, at least the public ones that have been named, South Carolina has landed 5 players from the portal. And I mentioned this today on Gamecock Central. For those of you who aren't subscribers to the GC, this is actually one of the free articles. Having said that, take advantage of the $1 deal that you can sign up for the first month today. The number, we're talking about transfer portal, the number of people who've signed up for Gamecock Central this month. We were in a group chat. Wes Mitchell, my colleague, sent us a message. It is insane. So thank you to all of you who sign up for Gamecock Central, because honestly, and I've been in different markets, I've had opportunities to work in TV, and this is special because when you guys are, number of the people are hopping on right now to watch this, it shows that people care. So it makes what we're doing, it makes everything worthwhile. It makes driving back from Virginia, 6-hour drive, pulling over in Rock Hill at a McDonald's parking lot to make another welcome home video, just in case Rocket Sanders decided to go out that night, which he delayed things until the next day. It makes it worthwhile. So appreciate you guys. All right, talking about the 5 players that have committed to South Carolina so far and sharing where South Carolina stands in the transfer portal rankings. Now, what I'm going to share right now might confuse some, so I'm going to try to explain it the best I can. When you look at the transfer portal rankings, how is that determined? Well, they take into consideration a lot of metrics as far as, how good a player was when he was coming out of high school, production at the school that he was at before he entered the portal, basically just putting it all in one and blending it up. So On3's Team Transfer Portal Index utilizes the On3P performance score to measure a team's production during the transfer process, compared relative against its roster and not a comparison against other schools. This algorithm determines if a school has improved its overall team talent, stayed the same, or declined in talent during the transfer window. So having said all that, the reason I share that is because when we talk about the fact that South Carolina has landed 5 players so far, which does not, if you're just joining us, that does not include the 2 welcome homes that Shane Beamer has posted about this afternoon. But it's important to point that out because look at this number. And some of these numbers, I get it. Everything's on paper, right? You got to wait until you go out there and see what the team actually looks like on the field. But from a grading standpoint, of the 5 players South Carolina has been able to pick up, they have graded out at an 83.6. 83.6. Of the 16 former Gamecock players to hit the portal, their combined grade, again, all 16, not just one and Juice Wells, all 16, their combined score, 68.44. So while we can sit here and talk about, all right, Juice Wells leaving, again, and I've mentioned this, but I'll say it again. I'm not naive. You're not naive. Certainly this team, at least on paper, would be better with Juice Wells next year. There's no question about that, but the show still goes on, right? Guy into the portal, can't cry about it, on to the next one. Being able to take advantage of some of these additional scholarships that South Carolina has because of the number of scholarship players who entered the portal. Again, 16 have entered the portal this offseason, 18 in total. Because of that number, USC has had the ability to use those scholarships and improve in different areas. Now, certainly when you look at the running back room, you look at the wide receiver room, they didn't have a choice, right? They had to go out there and not just try to find talent, which of course you're looking for talent and experience, but they just needed to get depth. The number of people, or the lack thereof, in the running back room, in the wide receiver room, at the beginning of the week, really, but even going back to the end of last week, that's why there was so much buzz and excitement about this past weekend's official visits and everything that was going on with the recruiting weekend. It's because people knew that South Carolina had some areas that they certainly needed to go out and fix. Having said that, they still have areas where they need to improve on. There's no question about that. But when you look at what they've done from a running back standpoint, in the guys that they've been able to pick up over the last couple of days, right? Starting with Rocket Sanders from Arkansas. Here's a guy that in 2022 rushed for 1,443 yards and 10 touchdowns. Now comes back from a knee injury, wasn't the same type of player last year with a combination of the injury that he's coming back from as well as the offense changing up a bit. But there's a reason why On Three considers him the number 2 back in the transfer portal this offseason because he's that damn good. He's that damn good. So you look at him, you look at what South Carolina was able to get from a guy like Oscar Attaway from North Texas, a guy that's a big body back. He can be a bruiser, but he's also someone that is proven to be a difference maker as a pass catcher, whether that be out of the backfield, whether that be in the slot, whether that be out on the perimeter. And when you think of some of the things at South Carolina, at least as of today, right? As of today, where you might still have some concerns with the offense, certainly one, and I've mentioned this even going back towards the end of last season, you need to be able to get depth in that quarterback room. You need to at least add one more body. But when you look at the wide receiver room, even though there's a lot of young talent, you still want to be able to help yourself out if, God forbid, some of these guys aren't able to take that next step. I mean, in a perfect world, the guys that you recruit, especially some of these 4 stars, high 3 stars, you're hoping that they're going to be able to take that next step this offseason. But sometimes it doesn't work out. We've seen that here in the past with South Carolina with 4 stars. We've seen that with high 3 stars. And it's not just exclusive to South Carolina. It happens throughout college football. There's guys who are highly recruited coming out of high school, but for whatever reason, they're just not able to take that next step once they get to college. So I say that because having a guy like Attaway, not only are you getting a talented running back, but you're also getting someone that can make a difference in the passing game. And on top of that, when we say passing game, he's also someone that, from talking to people close to the program, one of the things that the coaches were very impressed with Attaway is his ability to be a difference maker in pass protection. Now, losing a guy like Mario Anderson, Mario improved in the pass pro game, right? I mean, it wasn't just running the football. It was something where he was able to go out there and get better. And if anyone has been listening to the shows that we've done over the years, what has Marcus Lattimore always said? The easiest way to stay on the field as a running back is to prove to the coaches that you can make a difference in pass pro. If you can block, you will stay on the field. So I look at what USC has been able to do with the additions of those two, starting with those two. Now, and I see people asking about Juju McDowell. Do you think Juju McDowell will enter the port? No. I mean, you got to remember, too, Juju's coming back from a broken collarbone. There's a lot of uncertainty with him. But he's a tremendous leader. And I would love to see him back out there and making the difference in some shape, way, or form, because Juju in space, as we all know, he's very dangerous. Very dangerous. It wasn't too long ago when this young man was a freshman, Shane Beamer's first year, and some of the things that we were able to see from Juju. So I wouldn't sleep necessarily on Juju, despite the fact of what South Carolina has done in this running back room. Certainly there's only so many carries that can take place in a game. And that obviously will be determined by a lot of factors, such as the score, such as the opponent. But being able to have a guy like Juju out there is going to be great, especially if he's able to come back and is as healthy as he once was. So having said all that, and the reason why I want to spend some time talking about the running back room is because now, from a scholarship standpoint, as of today, as of right now, 3:50 as we tape this show on Thursday, December 14th, 2023, Juju McDowell, DJ Braswell, because Braswell gets lost in the mix here a little bit, right? Where people are very excited about these guys coming in, Attaway, and being able to bring Rocket. DJ Braswell impressed me a lot in his limited action this year towards the end of the season, especially when Joyner went down. And Braswell, unfortunately, because of the injuries that piled up in the running back room, he was asked to do a little bit more, and he wasn't able to protect his red shirt this season, which means heading into next season, he's going to be a sophomore. He won't be a redshirted freshman. So you got Juju McDowell, you got DJ Braswell, you have the additions now of Rocket Sanders, the addition of Oscar Adaway. So you have 4 right there. 4 guys that have proven in some shape, way, or form, scholarship guys, to play at the college level. Then the guys who are still out there for South Carolina, scholarship-wise, Matthew Fuller, one of the top running backs in the nation. And if you guys have been following the recruiting process on this young man, my goodness. If Matthew Fuller was a stock and you bought Matthew Fuller stock, say, 8 months ago, a year ago, around the time period when South Carolina offered him and he committed to the Gamecocks, my goodness, if that was a stock, you'd be sitting pretty right now, real pretty. Because Fuller's up to number 11th now in the country. Yeah, God loves comics. It's Apple stock now. He's up to number 11. And the thing with Fuller, which is, it's the reality of what happens when you recruit a young, talented guy who is overlooked early in his career, but he absolutely plays out of his mind his senior year. More teams are going to come knocking. So that's what we've seen. If you guys have been following the reports on Gamecock Central, my colleague Wes Mitchell has done an outstanding job of keeping everyone informed on that situation, especially as to what is going on. And that's not to scare people that, man, Fuller could be going elsewhere, but it's just the reality, right? He played out of his mind. And you would love for South Carolina to still be able to get his commitment, because we were to look at Rocket Sanders. Rocket's only going to be here 1 year. Rocket's only going to be here for 1 year. And you look at the breakdown of some of these players that South Carolina's picking up, at some point you still want to be able to develop some of that young talent in that running back room, simply because some of those guys won't be here after 2 years. And obviously we know as the portal goes, you can never assume anything these days. So right now, just looking at South Carolina's running back room on paper, and that's not even to mention, and I know some probably feel like it's a long shot still, but we'll throw this in there for the sake of conversation, that you also have Daniel Hill still in the mix. I know that there's been crystal balls, RPM, things going back and forth, right? Mississippi State, Alabama for a while. South Carolina is still in the mix. Still in the mix. Having said all that, in the event that South Carolina they're not able to land a guy like Daniel Hill, and in the event that Matthew Fuller doesn't commit to South Carolina, and again, if you're just joining us, that's not Mike saying, okay, hey, Fuller is not going to know. We're just talking about, hypothetically, the additions over these last couple of days should make you feel better still. You add on Fuller, you add on Daniel Hill, that's just the cherry on top. So what South Carolina has been able to do going back to last week, and Cameron, thank you. Thank you. We appreciate that. What South Carolina has been able to do since last week with Mario Anderson hopping into the portal, it has been exactly what one could have just dreamed for, right? Guy enters the portal. On top of that, Takarion Joyner, he exhausted his eligibility after playing this season, so he has no more eligibility left. You have 2 guys now that you have to fill the roles for. Well, now you go out there, you get Rocket Sanders, and you're also able to get a guy like Oscar Adaway. And in addition to that, and I know someone mentioned the name, and I want to go back to it. Where is it? Erlin. Appreciate you hopping on, as always. Erlin says, it won't shock me if he does transfer, especially if we get Howell. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Howell. Jawan Howell, he was a true freshman this past year at South Carolina State, 6'1", 215 pounds, just an absolute tank of a running back. He is another player South Carolina is still looking at. And from talking to people close to the program, despite the fact that the Gamecocks were able to pick up Attaway, despite the fact that they were able to pick up Rocket, there could be another running back via the portal joining South Carolina in the near future. So I bring these things up because this is a young man who, again, true freshman last year, true freshman, 102 carries for 809 yards, 7 rushing touchdowns, had about $150 receiving, 2 touchdowns through the year, 10 receptions, which, oh, by the way, that would stack up as the third most receptions for South Carolina returners. That's not obviously including the new additions, Brown, and we'll get into McGowan as well, but just strictly talking about Doty and Harbor. 10 receptions last year. Very talented back, but he has 3 years of eligibility remaining. So that is another player. To keep an eye on. And someone that South Carolina is still going after. Jawan Howell, 6'1", 215 pounds, just an absolute tank last season for South Carolina State. The game against Howard about a month ago was November 4th, 27 carries for 283 yards, 3 touchdowns. Just missed out on having an Al Bundy game. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, didn't get the 4. For those of you that did, thank you for understanding that Married with Children's reference. But that's another player to keep an eye on. And you just look at what South Carolina is doing to some of these weaknesses. They're making their strengths. And I've mentioned this before over the last couple of weeks. Let's say Sellers is the guy, right? Let's say you're one of those people that thinks Sellers is ready to go, and he very well could be, especially with what the quarterback room is looking like. Dante Reno is going to be arriving in January. Other than that, you have just those two. Luke Doty going back and forth between quarterback and wide receiver rooms. What it sounds like from talking to people close to the program yesterday is that Doty will be in the wide receiver room this year. The reason why I'm hesitant to really start putting that out there, but I'm sharing that, of course, here, is because I can actually expand on it in comparison to when you type and you put stuff on paper. Sometimes people can misunderstand things a little bit. It all depends what South Carolina is able to do from a portal standpoint with gaining at least one more quarterback before spring football. So I say that because in a perfect world, USC is able to bring in an additional quarterback. We know that Swain, the quarterback from Vanderbilt, took a visit to South Carolina earlier this week. I think it was actually on Tuesday. In a perfect world, South Carolina has at least 3 quarterbacks in the spring. And we'll get back into the quarterback situation in just a little bit. And Erlen says, Howell went off against Howard. I'll definitely be hyping. Keith, good to see you, Keith. Keith said Howell just told Kornblut he's now up to 238. My goodness. Yeah, must have grown. Could have grown an inch, right? 18, 19 years old. Can still keep growing. So, yes, he was 6'1", 215, listed by South Carolina State's program. But our good friend Keith Alsap, who does a good job covering the Gamecocks himself, is sharing that Phil Kornblut of SC Sports Talk is saying that he's up to 6'2", 238. So, again, that is someone to keep an eye on for South Carolina because they are certainly looking to continue to add talent to areas where they feel like it's not just about, okay, where are we good at or where do we need to be good at still for next year. It's trying to continue to project a little bit over the next couple of years. And the other thing, too, is, and we keep saying this, right? It's competition. You know, guys are going to come here and then some guys are going to leave. But the other thing, too, is when you look at the transfer portal and the rules, some of these guys that are joining USC that are coming via the portal, unless they're going to be a grad transfer, kind of got them locked in a little bit, right? It's not as simple as, okay, you come here and then you can transfer the next year out, right? So this is actually going to be a little benefit for them to be able to hopefully get some of those guys. But talking about the quarterback situation, let's go back to the QBs real quick. So I'm not going to be shocked to see this. And I'm not saying this is exactly what's going to happen with South Carolina. But I get this sense, I get this feel, and maybe it's because of the position that they're in, having Luke Doty, even if Doty is fully in the wide receiver room this year, that he can still be an emergency quarterback. And it made me start thinking, and this is from talking to people close to the program yesterday, that USC might not be loading up on quarterbacks the same way that historically, and I say historically, I'm not talking about going all the way back to the days of, goodness, our good friend, as I get a message here about one of these recruits, so bear with us. All right, we're just keeping track again. We're just waiting to make sure some of these welcome homes that we're ready to go on them. But I'm not talking about going back to the days of someone like Todd Ellis. What I'm talking about is the last, 10, 15, even 20 years or so, right? You've seen a lot of programs carry like 5, 6 quarterbacks. Now, not all of those guys are scholarship guys, but I would not be shocked. I would not be shocked to see teams. And again, this could be something South Carolina does this year. From the conversations I've had with people, South Carolina might only add one more quarterback. And you have 3, not including Doty. Again, Doty, emergency QB if he decides to stay in the wide receiver room. So I say that because while I do feel like you still need to have depth in that room in particular, if 2021 taught us anything, right? The musical chairs that they went through because of the injuries at quarterback. But being able to go out into the portal now and get quarterbacks to add depth each year, if you feel like that's what you need to do, I think that's going to be something. I feel like it's going to be a thing that programs are going to start to do more of. And you're going to see a similar fit to what you're seeing in the NFL, where teams don't carry as much quarterbacks and they can use those scholarships elsewhere. So again, that's not to say that's going to be exactly the way that it plays out, because it all depends if South Carolina is able to get Swain or not. If there's another quarterback that they feel like would be a good fit here to create competition, to create depth with experience in that quarterback room, to push Sellers to be the best quarterback that he can be, to push a guy like Dante Reno as he gets set to arrive here in just a couple weeks, that you're able to use those scholarships elsewhere. Now, there's always the possibility you can bring in one of the local quarterbacks from a high school around town, right? Walks on, preferred walk on, runs the scout team, stuff like that. But I wouldn't be shocked, just because with the way the portal is these days, the more quarterbacks that you keep on your depth chart, and I look at the quarterback position more so than these other positions strictly because there's only one guy that can play, right? There's only one guy. Even if you try to get all cute and fancy and have some type of wildcat package or whatever, you're not going to be able to get them out there that often. You're not going to be able to rotate them the same way, say as a defensive back, receiver, running back, wherever the case may be. So I think coaches, and from having conversations with coaches, not just at South Carolina this week, but throughout college football and the FCS ranks, FBS across the country, not just SEC coaches, you get this sense that we could start to see that trend, strictly because you're seeing what's happening with quarterbacks that have been stashed on rosters who, they're waiting for their opportunity, but now they have the ability just to hop right into the portal. So why waste a couple extra scholarships if you don't feel like you need more than 3 guys? So we'll have plenty of time to talk about that throughout the offseason, especially as we get ready for spring football. And we'll see what South Carolina is able to do over the next couple of days. If you're just joining us right now, Shane Beamer had a second welcome home tweet within the last hour. That is his second one of the day. As to when both of those players are going to announce their commitments, we're still waiting on it. We're also still waiting on intern Joe to hop on with us just in case I need him. If one of these commitments go public while we're on the air here, so that I can go over and finish up one of the breakdown videos. And I'll tell you what, and I kind of hinted at it earlier on Twitter, and I'm going to still call it Twitter. There is a massive, massive, massive pickup that South Carolina was able to gain today from one of those welcome homes. And again, if you're just joining us, not trying to dangle the carrot in front of you to be a jerk, we obviously at Gamecock Central, and I know the Big Spur and other outlets around town, you respect the wishes of these individuals when they want to either announce it on their own or they're kind of just moving at their own pace. And then other players like Rocket Sanders yesterday, some will be like, all right, yeah, go ahead. Put it out there. I'm expected to do it. So that's kind of where we're at right now. That's why we're sitting in the situation that we're in, and we're not coming out with some of these guys quite yet. But a nice pickup, 2 nice pickups, but there's going to be one I think that's really going to excite Gamecock fans. And the other thing too is this upcoming weekend is going to be exciting because there's some additional pieces that I think South Carolina can still gain some experience in. I look at tight end. I look at the offensive line. I look at what South Carolina has been doing on the defensive line. And we'll get into DeAndre Jules in a little bit, the Pittsburgh transfer, defensive tackle, big boy with plenty of experience. There's a lot of things that South Carolina has been able to do to improve certain areas, but there's still areas where they can get better. They can still get better. Jay Diz, good to have you on. Good to have you on. So we'll see. I still think that tight end room, even with a guy like Josh Simon back, it's still going to be very young, very inexperienced. And when you look at it, at least right now, right? Sellers coming in, expected to be QB1 week 1. You have a young quarterback. So being able to build pieces around him, I mean, you have to. You don't have a choice. I mean, God bless Spencer Rattler and the things that he was able to do last year. I know we talk a good bit about the offensive line, and rightfully so. But once that running back room, which was already thin and unproven, once things played out the way that it did, it made things a little bit more difficult, right? The run game wasn't able to get going, and then receivers started to get injured, starting with Juice Wells. So a couple things like that. All right, what we got here? Beamer killing it in the portal. Wonder if he caught Juice in there. So I've been talking about this on social media. I talked about it last night on the Insider Forum, and then again earlier today on SEC Sirius XM with Alyssa Lang and Chris Doring. So yesterday, I started to see some of the rumbles as to, could Juice come back to South Carolina? What's going on with that? So, and I know Chris Clark, my colleagues, Chris and Wes, we're constantly just calling and texting people. I mean, I was on the road all day on Thursday going up to Virginia to watch my former college football coach, Bob Chesney, be introduced as the head coach at James Madison. So I went up there, was up there for about 2-3 hours, and then I drove back. So 6 hours back, back and forth, 12 hours on the road. So I did my best to call coaches, call players, try to get connected as best I can with everything. And I started hearing things about Juice a little bit, but things started to really pick up on Wednesday. So what I've been told about the Juice Wells situation, and this was as of yesterday afternoon. What I've learned about these situations, and I think back to the Mario Anderson situation from last week, not true apples to apples, but my point being is things continue to change over time in a span of even just a couple hours because of NIL, the transfer portal. This is just a different ball game. This is just a totally different world. What I know about the Juice situation, the way that it was phrased to me yesterday is the door is shut, but it's not locked. It's not locked. Having said that, I was also told that it doesn't look like that is going to happen, that he's going to come back to South Carolina. And it's not necessarily, okay, let's say Juice wants to come back. If Juice wants to come back, that's one thing. But there's multiple hurdles that he's going to have to overcome in order for those things to happen. And what I mean by that is the way that he left South Carolina, I'm not even just talking about, and I know some people will talk about some of the Instagram videos, right? Being in the barbershop inside the ops bill. I'm not talking about stuff like that. I'm talking about things that bothered people in that building down the stretch. Juice is a really good person. Being able to get to know him, I think his heart is, I think he's got a big heart. I think, unfortunately, though, and it started happening towards the end of the season, I think, unfortunately, he started to hear a lot of voices from people who were, people felt like it was in the best interest for him, and he's trying to appease those voices. So I still think that where things are at right now, Juice will end up going to Ole Miss. I think what's really hurt him, unfortunately, is because of how some things have transpired from certain people in his camp, that the stock for him, right? We'll call it stock, the NIL money. I think the amount of money that he was being told that he'd be able to make, I think he's finding out that's not the case. That some of these schools aren't viewing him to be as highly paid as he was being told by some people in his camp. And I feel bad for a kid like that. I do, because I think he's trying to appease to so many people that he feels like are telling him things for his best interests. And I think, unfortunately, what happens is you're listening to too many voices and you get caught up with some of that stuff. So again, not trying to make it seem like Juice is a victim here, but I also do feel for a kid like that. So again, if he were to come back to South Carolina, and I've said this before, his decision to leave was not just strictly about NIL. It was not strictly about NIL. I think a lot of people talk about, oh, South Carolina doesn't have the money to do. They have the money. Okay. They've improved a hell of a lot, especially because of the number of supporters through Garnet Trust over the last 2 weeks, I think, with the $1 million match closing in on that number to be able to get up to, that'd be $2 million right there, right? If they're able to raise $1 million, they're going to be able to match that with $1 million. So I say those things because it's certainly helping. It's certainly helping. And we're seeing it right now. If anyone has any doubts, go look at what USC has been able to do in the transfer portal. They're not just bringing off a bunch of schlubs off the street who haven't played at all from lower divisions, which I know some of you get all upset when they're an Ivy League guy or this or that. But the guys they're bringing in, Power 5 guys, some of these guys, Power 5 guys. Erlen asks, is the lineman from Pitt going to play D tackle or DN? I was told that he's going to play D tackle, Erlen. So when he went to Pittsburgh originally, he was, or at least coming out of high school, he was much smaller than what he is now. I think it was like 250, but now he is, he's a much bigger boy. But he moves around well from watching, and you're talking about DeAndre Jules for those of you who may have missed it yesterday. South Carolina being able to pick up the Pittsburgh transfer defensive tackle, a guy who played in 12 games last year, plenty of experience, 6'3", 310 pounds, a Maryland guy. So talking about continuing to have success in the DMV, right? Last season for the Panthers, he started in 6 games, had 24 tackles, 7.5 tackles for loss, a pair of sacks, and he also forced the fumble. Redshirt in 2019, he's played in a total of 37 collegiate games. In those 4 seasons, he's accumulated 37 tackles. Of course, this past season being his best because it was 24 tackles, 11.5 tackles for a loss in his career, and 3.5 sacks. Listed as an edge, and this goes back to Erlen, your question a little bit, and hopefully explains it a little bit as well. Listed as an edge prospect out of high school, Jules was ranked as a 3-star prospect and as the 14th best prospect in the state of Maryland for the class of 2019, according to the On3 industry ranking. The reason he has an extra year of eligibility, because some will say, wait, 2019, that math doesn't add up, is because he has the 2020 COVID season. So there you go. That's why you're able to have him back. And I think he's going to be a great addition. You look at, too, with what USC has been able to do from a retention standpoint, right? And we talked about it on Tuesday. I've talked about it on this show going back to last week. Some people won't look at it the same way as I'm about to say it, just because it's so new and people don't want to do it yet. But you should celebrate roster retention. Again, I know that sounds crazy. I think it is a little stupid at times to be sitting here. I'm not saying like, go get a friggin' bottle of champagne and go pop something, right? Go, woohoo, our All-American freshman defensive back is coming back. No, but it's important because, again, whether you like it or not, just like this transfer portal stuff, just like this NIL stuff, roster retention, this is the new way of life in college football, whether we like it or not. And if you don't have roster retention, go look at what Vanderbilt's going through with their quarterback situation. I mean, my goodness. I mean, that quarterback room is empty. So roster retention is still very, very important. As I've said before, I still would put a premium 1A, 1B with high school recruiting, 1A, and then 1B being player retention. Skip 2, go to 3, that's transfer portal. And that's not to say the transfer portal is not important. We're seeing how important it is right now for South Carolina. My whole point is, when you look at still the core of this team, a lot of it has to do with players that you recruit out of high school. Talented guys, especially what Beamer's been able to do over the last couple of years. You're going to lose guys naturally, right? But let's use Nicholas Harbor, for example. You bring in a guy like Nicholas Harbor or Nick Eamon-Worry, right? I mean, those are guys that you brought in. And yeah, there's going to be guys over time that you lose. That's just college football. Go look at what's going on in the upstate with Clemson losing 2 of their starting defensive backs this offseason. It's part of college football. So being able to retain players, and as I mentioned before with Garnet Trust, being able to retain players, especially when you're able to have the additional money right now because of the funds, because of you, the fans, have been able to make a direct impact with donating to Garnet Trust, Carolina Rise, the impact Park Ave's having. Because of that, South Carolina has been able to go out there and have a very, very successful start to the transfer portal season being open. And I don't want people to think the only reason South Carolina is picking up these players is strictly because of money, because that's certainly not the case. With the 5 players that we've talked about, Jared Brown from Coastal, Oscar Attaway from North Texas, Rocket Sanders from Arkansas, J.D. McCowan from Vandy, and now defensive tackle from Pittsburgh, DeAndre Jules. They're not just coming here for money. That's not, I don't want people to get it twisted. They see an opportunity here, certainly with some of the lack of depth and lack of proven talent in some positions. And that's one of the main reasons why they're coming here. Now, every player, there's going to be different reasons for, right? And what played a role into why they came here. Is NIL part of some of their packages? Of course. You look at a guy like Rocket Sanders. Here's a guy that coming out of high school, he was a receiver/athlete, and he was getting recruited by Justin Stepp, played for Justin Stepp for a couple of years before Justin came over to USC in 2021. You look at a guy like offensive coordinator Dal Loggins, who was the tight ends coach in Arkansas when Rocket was there for a couple of years. They crossed paths. So there's some familiarity with some of these players. I mentioned a guy like Rocket Sanders. You look at a guy like McGowan. He grew up in South Carolina. I believe he's a Lawrence, South Carolina native. You're taking advantage of some of these connections that you do have. And I think that's always a positive. What else we got here? Looks like intern Joe. Might need him to hop on for us shortly. So God Loves Comics says, Mike, is there any intel? Montique Rames being reinstated, or is he gone for good? As of right now, we haven't heard or at least I haven't heard. I don't want to put words in the mouths of my colleagues, Chris or Wes, because maybe they have. But to my knowledge, there hasn't been any discussions about that. So if that changes, we will keep you posted on Gamecock Central. But at least for now, nothing new to share. Travis asks, is it published anywhere the amount of money in the Garnet Trust / Carolina Rise and the amount of money given to individual players' terms of payment? I don't believe so, Travis. I don't work for either of them. We help them out indirectly, especially Garnet Trust, but I don't believe so. I'm trying to think. I mean, there's issues when you have these contracts with some of the players in public knowledge. And the other thing that you have to worry about too is it's not just about, okay, the transparency, which some fans would love with some of these collectives, and I totally get it. But now, if you put it out there, and I'm just making this up, player, X is getting paid $100,000. Now another school has an idea of what he's how much he's making. Now, I know for a fact that there's been players on South Carolina, even going back to last year, that have gone to the coaching staff, that have gone to the collectives, and they've said, hey, and again, because some people live under a rock and they're just naive, tampering goes on. The issue with the tampering stuff is, number one, can you have concrete evidence to prove it? Which a lot of these people, some people might not be the brightest out there, but they're not going to be dumb enough to put something on paper that can be traced back. But number two, the NCAA has to care even if you have concrete evidence. So having said all that, going back to even last season, there were situations, there were times where there were players going to the staff, going to the collectives and saying, hey, this school X, school Y, school Z, they're offering me this much amount of money to go. How much can you give me? I mean, that's just where we are with college football. Again, it's one of the things, whether you like it or not, that's where we're at. And when you're in a position as a collective, as coaches, and you're hearing that, you have to make decisions. Number one, is a player calling your bluff, right? Is he just saying that's what's happening? Because going back to your point, Travis, and this is why, if you're going to do it, you have to have it in a way where everything's public knowledge, which I don't think it will ever get to that point, unfortunately. Like NFL contracts, right? It's not, and that's the problem. We all know looking at it that that's what essentially this all is, but it's supposed to be name, image, and likeness. It's not supposed to be pay for play. Again, you're naive if you believe that it's not in some shape, way, or form pay for play. So I say that because what South Carolina is dealing with, and other schools are as well, you have to figure out, is a player just saying this to get me to give them more money, or do we have to really be worried about this? And in cases going back to even last season that I was told about, players did that, and it was like, hey, you want to enter the portal? Fine, go enter the portal. And some of those players didn't. So you get to this year, Mario Anderson, again, not exactly true apples to apples with some of the situations and scenarios that I brought up from last year. But now you have a situation with Mario Anderson and his NIL agent come Thursday, basically does the exact same thing, where it's like, hey, we're going to go into the portal, if you don't offer us this amount of money. Which, oh, by the way, as I've shared before, without giving the exact number away, Mario wanted X amount of money. Garnet Trust made him an offer. He wasn't happy with it. Garnet Trust turned around. They offered him twice the amount of money. You're not going to be able to make every player happy, right? You're not going to be able to pay everyone exactly what they think they deserve. And that's the other problem, too. I think, unfortunately, a lot of these players view things in a manner in which it's like the NFL in cap space. That's not how this works. With Juice Wells not being here, there's been a lot of scenarios going on behind the scenes with players going to the coaching staff, going to the collectives, who some of them already have deals in place. And they're saying, hey, Juice isn't going to be back next season. I want more money. That's not how this friggin' thing works. That's not how this works. So, and it's not, again, we're talking strictly about South Carolina here because we cover the Gamecocks. This is Gamecock Central. But this is taking place throughout college football. The conversations I've had with numerous coaches, especially this week, This is happening at a lot of places right now. And it's tricky to navigate because you're trying to do what's in the best interest of your program. You're trying to have roster retention. You're trying to do all these little things. But at the same time, too, you're trying to figure out and go through the weeds of what's true, what's not. It's tough. So South Carolina, it's like, hey, you want to go enter the portal? Have at it. And they did. And they did. Now, looking at it now, it's a little bit of an easier pill to swallow, right? Because you have Oscar Attaway. You have Rocket Sanders. The running back room looks completely different on paper right now in comparison to where it was, say, a week ago. Certainly where it was a week ago, but even going back to last offseason, for crying out loud. So, yeah, I mean, it's some crazy stuff. The more I learn about NIL, the more I learn about the portal. And when I say learn, I'm talking about what's taking place really in the weeds, what's taking place, the stuff that I think some people, and some of you probably aren't naive to it, but I think some people are naive to thinking, oh my goodness, I can't believe that would happen. That's not what it's supposed to be. Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. But it happens. It happens. These things take place, whether it's right or wrong. What do we got here? Intern Joe's with us. We're going to have Intern Joe hop on with us. Intern Joe, thank you for hopping on. For those of you who don't know Intern Joe does a show with us on Tuesday nights. GC Live Talking Tuesday. I say Tuesday. We move the show around. I mean, it's going up and down, back and forth, afternoons, nights. He also does the walkthrough on Sundays during football season, does basketball during the week. So if you guys are interested to know what's going on with basketball, be sure to check out Intern Joe and what his shows. Travis goes, thoughts on the most recent commit, Mike? Kennard or Overton would be fantastic. So as of right now, we are still waiting for the official word on who those guys will be and who South Carolina was able to land. Shane Beamer, again, if you're just joining us, Shane Beamer announced this afternoon, probably within the last 2 hours, I'd say.
Yeah.
He's in 2 different welcome homes. So where we're at right now with South Carolina, they've been able to add a lot of key pieces on offense, right? You're able to add depth, experience to the wide receiver room, right? With being able to bring in a guy like Brown and McGowan. Running back room, we've talked about ad nauseum on this program with Attaway and Rocket Sanders. But what happens to the defensive side of things? We mentioned, of course, with DeAndre Jules. I'm interested to see, and some people might not know exactly who these players are. And again, these are not to say that these are the players. But when the official word gets announced, we will put those guys out. But we'll talk about these because these are a couple players South Carolina has been going after. LT Overton, I mean, if you remember from a couple of years ago, a 5-star prospect coming out of high school, plays at Texas A&M. Of course, A&M is going through a bunch of, goodness. I mean, it's a friggin' circus over there right now.
Oh, yeah.
With everything since Jimbo Fisher left. So, the thing about Overton that's interesting is it sounds like, depending on who you talk to that is close to his circle, that he would like to be able to go to a place that he can play with his brother. Having said that, from some of the people I've talked with, some schools don't view his brother to be a starter at some of these places or to be someone that they want to give a scholarship to. So I say that because if you're a school like South Carolina, and it comes down to that, right? I'm not saying that's exactly what needs to happen, but if it comes down to that, do you decide to do that? And that's not to crap on his brother or anything like that, but that's just been one of the things I've been hearing. To me, Joe, I think you do it. I think you do it because what's the worst thing that happens? You add some more depth, right?
Yeah.
What's the worst thing that happens? You add some more depth.
Yeah, especially after last season, right? I think, depth is a luxury you certainly are going to try to afford this offseason. As scary as last season was with your depth and as many injuries as you had. Depth is a luxury, and you're going to do whatever it takes to get it, especially in this transfer portal era. And to get a guy like LT Overton along with, because you remember, you already have Tonka Hemingway and Boogie Huntley coming back. So to get a guy like LT Overton, that just, I mean, the depth is unreal. And so then that way you don't have to worry about other teams going about like double teaming your starters on the defensive tackle. I mean, we saw that. I mean, there were, I can remember it was almost like every other week we would see screenshots on Twitter of Boogie Huntley getting double teamed and Tonka getting double teamed on the defensive line. You add a guy like LT Overton. The offense is now on watch, really, because you have three guys who can go make a play. Now, when it was just two, Boogie and Tonka, they didn't have as much success because obviously you were keying in on them. When you have depth like that, and you have a third, maybe even a fourth dynamic player like that, it really, really makes a difference, especially on the defensive line. Because, you're going to have offenses in the SEC that want to go, right? Like Tennessee last year and in the past 2 years, the tempo has been an issue. So when you have a deep defensive line, especially at that defensive tackle position, edge, I know they're still looking for some edges. And then you also have Dylan Stewart coming in. So, I mean, depth is a very big luxury especially when you're looking at the defensive line like we are today, Mike. And then, I mean, obviously I've seen the comments about Malik Murphy. I don't know if you've talked about him yet, but that's also, something interesting to talk about here going forward.
Haven't talked about Malik Murphy. We will get into Malik Murphy in a little bit. I do want to go back to one of the other players that Travis brought up, because again, we're not trying to say that these are the guys that are going to be the welcome homes. These are the guys that are guys who, if you've been paying attention to Gamecock Central and what Chris, Wes, myself have been talking about over the last couple of days, last couple of weeks, really, it feels like months at this point, that Kyle Kennard from Georgia Tech, he would be an incredible addition to the Gamecocks. Now, for those of you who don't know who Kennard is make sure I have all my notes correct here. He is 6'5", 238 pounds. He has 1 year of eligibility remaining, but he had a huge season in 2023. 54 tackles, 11 tackles for loss, 6 sacks, a pair of forced fumbles. Had a game against Georgia. Had, I think it was 1.5 tackles for a loss. So he's someone that has a lot of, number one, experience, but a lot of proven talent too. Proven talent. I would love to see the Gamecocks add him. Mm-hmm. It would be massive for a lot of reasons, because number one, you always think about yourself, right? How can this make us better? But right now, South Carolina is in the mix going up against schools like Florida State. Took a visit there just last weekend. There's been rumbles that he's going to be taking a visit to Missouri this weekend. Does that still happen? So I bring this up because if you're able to get this guy who, according to On3's industry rankings, he's rated as the number 8 edge prospect in the transfer portal. If you're able to pick him up, it would be massive for multiple reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I did like this question from Will. Mike, I wanted to know what you thought of it. If we get these stud defensive linemen, do we switch back to a 4-man front? I think it's within the question, right?
No, I think you can, to me, and I think back to my college days, and, again, Joe, I was just talking about going up and visiting my college coach, Bob Chesney. We were very multiple on defense. And I feel like that's what you have to be in today's era, right? Yeah. I know there's some people that get upset with seeing South Carolina play the 4-2-5. The reason you have to play the 4-2-5, and you kind of see it in the NFL even, right? And you go against Travis Kelce. Kelce's more like a wide receiver. It's a tight end. But you have these skilled tight end guys, and you need to be able to have someone that's fast enough to be able to cover these guys. But you're also trying to find someone, okay, so we put someone out there that's big enough, but if they're just bigger, they're going to be able to run enough if they're going to go out there 4 wide, sometimes even 5 wide. So I bring those things up because I think what we could see from South Carolina certainly is a little bit more 4-man fronts. One of the reasons why I felt like we saw South Carolina go to the 3-man front is because they just didn't have the bodies to be able to rotate, fresh bodies in the middles, especially at defensive tackle, but even on the defensive edge position, right? DN playing the edge. So I bring those things up because you look at what USC has been able to do with the additions of, again, DeAndre Jules from Pittsburgh, just the stud defensive tackle, but then even the addition of a JUCO defensive lineman in Jerome Simmons. And I said this during Simmons' commitment the other day. 6'4", 333 pounds, Bamberg, South Carolina native. He is a guy that moves quickly. He's considered the second best defensive line prospect in junior college, the 15th best overall JUCO prospect for the class of 2024. Did some good things last year. Playing at Highland Community College in Kansas.
Yeah.
I like what USC is doing simply because they'll have fresher bodies. And when you have that, number one, it creates more competition. You're able to find someone that can hopefully be the guy, right? But on top of it all, the thing that I keep thinking about is just how fresh these legs can be up front. And I felt like that was something that was evident that USC struggled in. I mean, we talked about a lot with the defensive backs, but even going back, looking at the amount of snaps that some of the defensive linemen took last year, it was evident as the game went on that they were just gassed just because they did not have the proven commodities and bodies in those rooms to be able to go out there and throw some of those guys out there. So again, having more depth on the defensive line, defensive tackle, defensive end, if they're able to pick up a guy like Kennard, would be massive. And I wouldn't look at it as, oh man, yeah, they already have too many guys in there. Screw that. Just like running back, if they're able to pick up a guy like Hal from South Carolina State, good. Go out there. Keep loading up.
Yeah, and I will say the reps that South Carolina took in the 3-3-5 was certainly beneficial this last season. You know, Clayton White had some time to figure it out, go through some of the growing pains of switching your defense midway through the season. So if you have that depth, obviously you're going to use it and run the defense that you feel more comfortable with. But again, like I just said, I think, you know, the reps in that 3-3-5 are certainly helping this Gamecock defense. And Clayton White, you know, it's a learning experience. We saw that throughout the stretch. They got better at 3-3-5 as the year went along too.
Yeah, essentially all the 3-3-5 did was it allowed them to be able to have some fresher legs. That's all it really allowed them to do because they had some skill guys that they could put out there, right? Drop them back into that second level playing the linebacker position, and you're still able to send 4, sometimes 5 guys with depending on what your blitz packages are. But being able to have those fresher legs, I would not be shocked to see more 4-man fronts. Again, last year, a lot of it had to do with the fact that South Carolina just didn't have bodies at multiple spots. We talked about it with the linebacking core, right, as the season went on with just some of the injuries that piled up there. In the secondary, the number of snaps some of these guys were going up against. So I think, again, anytime you can add depth and fresher bodies out there, you can throw them out there, it's huge, but especially when you have proven guys. So, again, they've been able to do that already with the addition of Jules. If they're able to pick up a guy like Kennard, my goodness, the guy is an absolute freaking tank. Our guy Jay Diz says the defensive tackle from Pitt looks good. Reminds me of TJ Sanders. Yep. Both guys over 300 pounds. Yeah, I liked what I saw when I turned the tape on with Jules. Really liked what I saw with Jules. He's a very talented guy, big guy, of course. Mentioned the experience factor. Pat Narduzzi, his former coach at Pittsburgh, heading into this past season. And I'm paraphrasing right now. I'll see if I can actually get the exact quote because that would be a little bit better. But he was talking about just his ability of continuing to grow and being able to play on Sundays. Here's the exact quote from Pat Narduzzi, his former coach at Pittsburgh. He said, quote, I could see that guy playing in the NFL. He's big. He's physical. He's got a good pass rush. So just to give you kind of another indication as to what we could see. That's one thing to keep an eye on.
Yeah, Mike, I got one more point on the defensive line here. I think the way that South Carolina is recruiting the defensive line should give you hope. We've seen in the last couple of years, it's really, really, really hard to build up your line of scrimmage through the transfer portal. So the success that they're having already should give you some hope. And then the fact that you're still in it with LT and Kennards should give you a lot of hope too. So if you can, you know, bulk up on the defensive line and get a lot of guys early on in the transfer portal window as well. But if you can get all those guys in, I mean, the better, because then they're there for spring ball and whatnot, and then going forward. So I think that's big, especially if you can do it on the defensive line. And the offensive line is going to be one of those where you have to just recruit through the high school ranks. I heard Tyler Head talking about it on 107.5 The Game. It's going to be so much harder to replace offensive line guys from different schools, because the guys that are starting and the guys who are good enough to start aren't going to be moving. So that's a big deal. And so I think that should give Gamecock fans like a lot of hope going forward, is that South Carolina has been able to recruit these defensive linemen.
So Lauren just brought this up. And again, we don't share until these players come out and say it themselves, or unless there's a scenario like yesterday with Rocket Sanders where he passes it along and, you're able to put that out. We'll always respect the wishes of these collegiate athletes. But again, not that we hinted on who's the guy or who's not the guy, but to just share something that Lauren brought up. And I'm actually going to expand on it about how, according to Phil Kornblut of SC Sports Talk, he tweets, and he tweeted this at 4:37, so just about 4 or 5 minutes ago. He tweeted, just checked in with running back Juwan Howell. That is the running back from South Carolina State. On his way home from his visit with the Gamecocks, he said neither of the Beamer commitment alerts this afternoon pertained to him. So we just share that. We share that to just let people know that, again, 2 welcome homes from Shane Beamer this afternoon. And you can at least cross out one of them, according to Hal. So we'll take Hal at his word. Of course, I smile a little bit because I know who the guys are. We have the videos ready to go. But I'll say this. That is a guy that South Carolina is going to continue to stay on. Whether or not he makes his decision to commit to South Carolina today, tomorrow, next week, goes on other visits, and he should. He's a young man. He's got 3 years of eligibility left. It's not just the fact that this kid is a friggin' baller. It's the fact that wherever he goes, you can have him for at least another 2 years, right? If he wants to go declare for the NFL, right? If things go well. But at the same time, too, you might also be able to get him for 3 years. So I say those things simply because he is a talented guy.
Yeah, no doubt about it, Mike. No doubt about it. If you can go grab him, I mean, we talk about the defensive line. Running back's the other, spot that they're really beefing up on after struggles last season. And that's what you do, Mike, right? When you're struggling at a position one year and you've been dealing with injuries, you're gonna go into that offseason trying to beef up on it. And then obviously you should align it with, what your recruiting classes look like. And the 2023 class or 2024 class is offensive line heavy, and you also have Tree and Tro already in. So obviously they're not going as hard of attacking the offensive line, but running back is a position you definitely need some experience at, because you can't really start a true freshman running back unless, he's the next big thing in the SEC.
Yeah, I agree with that. And again, piggybacking off of what we've been talking about with the running back situation, when you look at a guy like Rocket, and I think someone else actually just brought this up, and we've kind of hopped around with some of these guys, but Luke mentions, Rocket only has 1 more year of eligibility left. So he said, I think we need to get him. I'm trying to think who he's talking about when he says him, but I think he's talking about Howell, or going after Daniel Hill, which, by the way, Daniel Hill is still on the market. He is not set to make his commitment until January 6th. That, look, Fuller's coming in, right? Again, at least as far as we know, he's still committed to South Carolina. Other schools are coming and knocking, trying to do their best to get him to flip. But the Gamecocks, of course, they are well aware of that. That's why we're seeing the videos of the coaches out there today continuing to recruit. I did see something earlier, and I don't want to spend too much time on it right now. There'll be a time and place to do it, but I also have seen a good amount of people ask it. And Joe, we've talked about it on our Tuesday show, but as you know, and now I'm getting a message about one of the commitments.
This is live, by the way.
So this happened a couple weeks ago, and I apologize, folks. I'll occasionally look down at my phone when we get some information, and some of it I can share with you guys. Some of it I have to hold back on. we're trying to have an idea as to when those two commitments will go public today. If today, if tomorrow. Um, if I can get an indication as to when they're going, I'd love to share that. What I can share with you is an update on the $1 million match from Garnet Trust. Garnet Trust has just shared that they are at $813,000, $813,744. So they're less than $200,000 away from being able to hit that $1 million. If they hit the million, get $1 million match. So I've said this before. Anyone that has ever griped about the transfer portal and, they need to go out here. Oh, we need more NIL money. If you donate $10, I just use the number 10, $10, you're essentially giving the program $20. So again, I know that some people aren't big on NIL. I know some people aren't big on what's going on with college football. I get it. But let's not get into this point come, I don't know, week 1, week 2, week 3, if something's not going well for South Carolina. It was a private donor, an anonymous donor. How much do I donate, Robert? Well, Robert, I covered the team. I've shared this before. I'm not necessarily a Gamecock fan. Having said that, I've done a lot for Garnet Trust with commercials and promoting Garnet Trust. So hope that answers your question, Robert. So even though I don't donate necessarily money to it, because again, I just cover the team. I'm a friggin' reporter. I've probably done more than some people on here. So how's that for an answer for you?
Still, by the way, did want to clarify that as well.
Yeah. But no, that's good. That's good. That's good. Robert, I apologize for my massholeness. I'll take that back. How do you donate? Robert, I'm sorry, man. I haven't had too much sleep these last couple days of the portal. I'm so sorry. You know what, Robert? How do you donate?
GarnetTrust.com.
Robert, I am so sorry.
Got it scrolling on the bottom, Robert. We're good.
All right, so Robert, how you donate? You can see the link on the bottom. Thank you for asking, because I'm sure you're not the only one that asked. I'm just a friggin' jabroni, Robert. Visit GarnetTrust.com to support, and you can be able to help the student athletes at South Carolina. And again, being able to help them throughout the transfer portal, right? I mean, this is part of it. Transfer portal, being able to go into the portal and being able to, go out and essentially we call it free agency, right? Being able to have that extra money. So fear the beard. And I just probably pissed off a bunch of people here. I've explained this before, but we have a good amount of people watching right now. When I say I'm not a Gamecock fan, I'm not from South Carolina. I didn't go to the University of South Carolina. So calling myself a Gamecock fan in comparison to, RIP, Gamecock Jesus, the Kirk Hollandsworths of the world, some of you guys that have experienced so much pain with this fan base. This is why I don't say I'm a fan in comparison to the fandom that you guys show. That's what I mean by that. Simply, I obviously cover the Gamecocks. I want them to do well, because who wants to cover a losing team? So, yeah, get ready to learn Chinese, buddy. So that's what I mean by that. Having said that, which we've talked about many times before, Phil, I promise you, I'm not a UMass fan. UMass is on the opposite side of Massachusetts.
Yeah.
That's on the opposite side. I've said this before. I grew up a Notre Dame fan simply because of the movie Rudy, and I'm a scrawny little trying to play football. So
I'm also I've got some Notre Dame ties as well.
The only team, honestly, the teams that I really follow now more than ever. I don't have a college team other than covering the Gamecocks, but the guys that I played football with, and that's kind of what I'm talking about. I'll follow guys like that. Let's see.
What else do we got?
God loves comics. Rudy grew up to be a hobbit.
I hear Rudy was offsides a lot. I get plenty of Notre Dame rags.
Yeah, I'm not a Notre. I haven't followed Notre Dame in years.
Can we be fans in this industry? Sure, when we're off, sure, I might pull for Notre Dame a little bit, but I I don't know.
I haven't followed. I mean, I've been covering the Gamecocks for 8 years now, and I really enjoy it. I really enjoy covering this team simply because the fan base is awesome. I enjoy the fan base. I enjoy the banter through the good times and the lows, which there's been plenty just in this 8-year span. And as I mentioned, as the longtime Gamecock fans know, there's been a lot of lows, unfortunately, in program history, but it makes the highs like last year, right, against Tennessee and beating Clemson. It makes that much sweeter. And when you have days like today, and not days like to just days to like today, but what's going on this week with the transfer portal, and you see the excitement from this fan base, it makes me wonder, man, what happens when they do get over that hump? What happens if they are able to get over it? I mean, we've seen it a little bit, right? So I think that, again, this is a team that was 5-7 last year, right? In a lot of places where you're 5-7 and, the season doesn't go the way that people were hoping it would go, they would get to this point and they wouldn't give two rats, you know what? But that's not the case here. People care. People care. And that's why I enjoy covering this team. What else do we have here on the docket before we wrap things up?
There was a quick question about your beard entering the transfer portal. I thought that was kind of a funny one. I snagged. We got a couple more. Wait, do you want to get to that one now and then go
real quick? Because so the thing with the beard is the beard will be entering the transfer portal at some point. The problem is, as some people have been reminding me, they're calling it a portal beard because there's been a lot of success. So I don't know if I shave it. Do I shave it right now with how things have been going, or we just kind of keep it rolling? So I think we might just keep it rolling for right now. Looking down at the phone, making sure that there's no additional messages. I don't know if he's watching, but if he is, shout out to Chris Clark, who just texted me. Don't shave until the portal closes. Lance says, nice meeting you, 2021. Had a blast. Shout out to Lance. I think, too, guys, before we wrap things up, what South Carolina, Joe Dirt, what we've seen with South Carolina, and the beard comments are going to be coming in. What we've seen with the transfer portal, what I really enjoy is the caliber of players in terms of what you're seeing as far as, all right, you go after a guy like, let's go to the next one, McGowan, right? Bring a guy in like McGowan. If that didn't work out, South Carolina was able to add Brown from Coastal. So I say that because obviously in a perfect world, you're able to get every guy that you're going after. But you just get a sense with some of these players because of their skill set. USC isn't just go back to last year, right? There's no question that USC dropped the ball with how they handled the transfer portal with the running back position last year. No question, right? I felt like they waited a little bit too long on some players. They went all in on others. I think because of what we learned last year, or what this staff learned, I think they're looking at things differently this year. And they're saying, all right, you know what? We're not going to make that same mistake twice. So if South Carolina, we mentioned Howell, right? In the event that South Carolina is able to pick him up, you have 3 transfer portal running backs that you were able to pick up this offseason. Now, you're replacing 2, right? Because the Carry-On Joyner's gone because he exhausted eligibility. You also lost Mario Anderson. You'll be gaining at least Matthew Fuller, as long as he stays committed to South Carolina. And then you're able to obviously bring in these 3. So I say that because, yes, the running back room will look a little bit more crowded in comparison to what it was last year as far as scholarship backs. But at the same time, too, what would you rather be in the scenario of? The scenario that could be playing out right now with South Carolina, if they're still able to land a guy like Fuller, even if they're able to land a guy like Daniel Hill. And let's say, just for the sake of conversation, they're able to pick up Howell too. You have all those running backs. Would you rather have that problem? Would you rather have the problem that we saw from this past year where you don't have as much proven talent? I mean, I think that's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, I mean, I think, this year they're really trying to attack the running back room. Obviously, you saw it with running back.
I don't know what's going on with Joe's mic real quick. So, Joe, while you get that fixed, sounds like it's a little echoey. So if you get that, just let me know. And then Joe will come back on. He'll pick up his thoughts. Travis Hill says, great show. As always, Mike and Joe, thanks for all the great info as usual. We have a big show, a very big show. And that's why I had intern Joe hop on with us. Some of you might not be familiar with intern Joe. We do the show together on Tuesday. Joe has been outstanding for us at Gamecock Central. But with today, not just today, it's been like this all freaking week, but especially today, with all the moving pieces going on with the transfer portal. I gave Joe a call at the last minute, and I said, Joe, we might need you to stand on by. So far, so good. But, pick up your thoughts. What you were going to say, Joe?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. No, you should be excited if, you're a South Carolina fan about this running back room. Rocket and Oscar Attaway. Or it's Oscar, right?
Yep, Oscar Attaway. Yep.
Attaway. All right, I just wanted to make sure I got his name right.
Attaway.
Yeah, he's going to be a dog.
That one right over your head.
I think he won't have as much time of an adjustment to make compared to Mario Anderson. I think he's going to be ready to play for the opener, you would hope. Him and Rocket both, Rocket's really, really dynamic. So that's obviously a big get. And then you add a guy like Attaway who has so much raw potential and has, the potential to break out in the SEC as a running back. So I think when you add 2 and 2, right? So you add a guy who's established and who knows how to do it. And then you add a guy who has that raw, breakout kind of speed like Attaway. It adds a whole nother dimension to your offense when, again, you're going into the spring with quarterback questions. So to have an established run game, and again, knock on wood that nothing happens in the spring and summer, but to have an established run game and guys that you can trust is huge. And we saw this last year, what happens when you don't have depth in the running back room. And then you're also banged up on your offensive line. This offensive line should be good to go. A lot of veterans ready to play, and then some freshmen who could also make a name for themselves and nose their way into the starting lineup. So there's a lot of things offensively, but after last year, the first thing that you wanted to do was go secure your running back room. And now they're going to go after another position that was in need, and that's your defensive line, and they're doing a good job of that so far. So far, so good. South Carolina fans should feel really good. This is a really, really good spree of welcome homes that South Carolina and Shane Beamer and the coaching staff has been on. So should be holding your head high. And then, yeah, Mike, thanks for giving me the call. I'm always available as we are this time of year. So happy to help out in any way I can this year.
So a couple things, too, I want to hit on before we wrap things up. South Carolina has been doing, obviously, a good job with some of the skill guys on offense, right? And from a flashy standpoint, you're able to see what they're doing at running back. You're able to see what they're doing at the wide receiver room. I think we could see a quarterback or at least a tight end in the near future, possibly another running back in the near future as well. But the offensive line is a position that I know, even going back to last season, that a lot of people still have questions about. And even though USC has done a nice job with being able to get some of those younger guys experience, certainly in a perfect world, you wouldn't have had to play Luedecke and Babalade or Trevon Ba as much as you did just because there were injuries. But you look at the glass half full now, right? You went through it. It is what it is. And because of them gaining that experience, now you have some more experienced guys in that room. Not to mention Marquis Anderson, who missed all of last year, for crying out loud. So I bring those things up because Texas Tech, this is according to our colleague Wes Mitchell, Texas Tech transfer portal offensive tackle Monroe Mills has set an official visit with South Carolina for today. So he's 6'7", 291 pounds.
Big boy.
We will keep you updated on how that visit went for Mills. Mills is considered a 4-star transfer portal prospect by the recruiting industry and is the top offensive tackle in the portal, according to On3. Let me say that again. Monroe Mills, who took a visit to South Carolina, told Gamecock Central on Wednesday that he was taking a visit on Thursday to South Carolina. He is the top offensive tackle in the portal, according to On3. Now, Mills started in 10 games at right tackle in 2022. then started in 12 games at left tackle in 2023 for Texas Tech. This will be the second transfer after originally starting his career at Oklahoma State. So I bring these things up because, again, it's real easy. It's real easy to get so caught up on the running back position, wide receiver position. Forget about the offensive line until we get to the season and, injuries happen or whatever. Oh, shoot, they should have done this better in the portal. They're going in the portal. They're going after the big dogs too, right? So they have some talented guys that they've been recruiting the last couple of years, and they certainly need to address some of the issues they had last year. They do have some experienced returning guys coming back from last year as well. As we all know, what it comes down to is, as corny as it sounds and as coach talk as it sounds, you can have the greatest talent in the world in that room. You need to be able to find 5 guys that can play well together, that build a good rapport with each other. And certainly with the number of injuries they went through last year, they always looked just a little bit out of sync. Now, there were some games they shined in, but big picture, to sum up the O-line last year, they always looked like they were just a little out of sync. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that they were just dealing with constant injuries, constantly shuffling guys around, right? Gargiulo going from this position to center, Vershawn Lee going from center to right tackle. I mean, it was a right guard. It was in tackle too. It was just, there were so many moving pieces. So you're hoping, obviously, that with a lot of the changes that are taking place with South Carolina this offseason, certainly being able to address a lot of it through the portal, that you're hoping you're going to be able to find that consistency with the offensive line. And if you're able to bring in a guy like Mills, my goodness. Because, again, as excited as some people might be about Lenore Sellers, it doesn't matter who the hell your quarterback is if you can't protect him. It doesn't matter. I mean, there's a reason why, and I have the utmost respect for Connor Shaw. But there's no question with what we saw from Spencer Rattler this year, many could make the argument that that was the most impressive season we've seen by a Gamecock quarterback, strictly based off of what they had to do, right? Now, in terms of wins and all that, right, I'm not trying to be like a wise guy when I say that, but if Rattler's not the quarterback last year, I don't know what South Carolina's record is. 5-7, it could have been a hell of a lot worse. So I say those things because Sellers is going to be in a position, if Sellers is the week 1 starter, there's going to be a situation where you're going to have to get this young quarterback ready to go. And how do you do that? Well, you get him some weapons at wide receiver. They've been able to do that so far, despite the fact of losing a very, 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 because again, I don't want people to think, oh, Mike's just blowing up, smoke up people's backside here. No. Replacing Juice Wells, you can't do that. You just can't. I mean, I think it's going to be nearly impossible, or at least from player to player, right? Nearly impossible to replace a guy like that. However, they've done the second best thing, which is you've been able to go out there and bring in some experienced, talented guys that can stretch the field, guys that are dynamic, that can also make a difference in the run game, like a guy like Brown from Coastal. Never mind the fact that you have a guy like Nicholas Harbor, who he's still growing and learning as he develops into a wide receiver after making the jump from tight end / defensive end in high school. So being able to have these pieces, wide receiver, impressive running back room, which you need. I don't friggin' care who the quarterback is next year. But if you have a young guy, you need to be able to have an established run game. Even if you have Spencer Rattler back, it helps. So, kudos to South Carolina so far for what they've been able to do from an offensive standpoint. Check. Running backs, okay, great. Receivers, I still think you need probably one more guy that you can go after. Yeah. And oh, by the way, let's not overlook the fact of some of the guys that are back next season for the Gamecocks in the wide receiver room. Guys that we really either saw just a little bit of what they're capable of doing, or guys that we really didn't see at all. One guy in particular, and of course, Harbor is a given, right? So let's just put Harbor to the side. But Tyson Russell is a player who I really, really think can take a big step next year.
Yep.
Now, certainly, depending on how things play out with certain roles in that wide receiver room, what it sounds like is that you're going to have Brown be a guy that's out on the perimeter, and McGowan's going to be inside. And I think Tyshawn, sorry about that. I pronounced his name wrong. This is what happens when you're dealing with a million names in the last couple of days with the portal and everything. But I'm interested to see Russell. I'm interested. God loves comics. Mazio
Bennett. Yeah, that's
but another guy too that was here last year that we didn't see because he was dealing with injuries early on is Elijah Caldwell.
Yeah.
So I bring this up, and that's not to overlook any other players in that room. But what I'm trying to get at is they do have talented guys in there, and this is going to push them. You don't want, and obviously if Mazio's able to come out and, be a guy that can play right away, that's great. Oh, okay. Yeah. God loves comic. Honestly, I don't even know what I friggin' said. I'm losing my mind at this point. I don't know how much hours of sleep I've had over the last 3 days. But being able to have these guys, it's great. But you also, when you're talking about SEC, there's always going to be an outlier. There'll always be a young guy that can, play right away. But in a perfect world, do you really want that? No, you'd rather have guys that are proven so that the freshmen, the younger guys, can come in and learn what college football is all about, what being a college athlete and student is all about, because there's a lot of things that they're going through for the first time, right? So I bring that up simply because Kelton Henderson, Keith, perfect. Another example.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, we can keep going down the list. Let me actually, we're already here. Let's just go through the list. I actually wrote a story about this just the other day.
Yeah, Mike, as you pull it up, I got 1 point on the development in the wide receiver room. Sure, you're not getting another Juice Wells. It's really hard to understate, but you did develop him. You brought him up, and JMU, obviously, they're doing their things, and obviously your college coaches there now taking the program to new heights. But I mean, Juice Wells was raw when he got to South Carolina, so you should trust your development enough to say, hey, sure, you can't replace him instantly, but maybe down the road you're going to develop the guys. And then I think part of that recipe, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong here, is bringing in the right guys, the right veteran guys from the transfer portal to bring up the young guys and also challenge them to be better and eventually be in the spot that Juice Wells was.
Yeah, so looking at the wide receiver room, right, we've talked about adding Brown, adding McGowan. This is the other players, though, that you're going to have in that room. Again, Luke Doty could be going back and forth, as I shared earlier in the program, though. From what it sounds like is Luke will be moving fully over into that wide receiver room and be an emergency quarterback. Again, how things play out as far as what South Carolina is able to add to that QB room during this transfer portal period before they head into spring football, that will play a role into it, right? Because if you only have two quarterbacks, Sellers and Reno, because reminding people, Reno will be enrolling early in January, you're going to need someone to hop into that room a little bit. So having said that, let's say, Doty, receiver for the sake of the conversation. You have Luke Doty, Peyton Mangrum. Mangrum, a former walk-on, mainly plays on special teams. Nick Harbor, of course. Tyshawn Russell, Elijah Caldwell. Caldwell didn't appear in a game in 2023. Still has 4 years of eligibility remaining. A guy that dealt with some injuries early on. A guy that I know a lot of people in this area would love to be able to see. A Northwestern guy, Rock Hill, South Carolina, Football City, USA. Kelton Henderson, he appeared in 2 games as a true freshman, but didn't record a stat. Still has 4 years of eligibility remaining. CJ Adams, if people remember the hype about CJ Adams coming out of high school, didn't appear this past season, but another big body, 6'2", 215. I'm sure he is probably over 220 at this point, 225. Mazio Bennett, of course, a lot of excitement to see the young, talented player from Greenville, South Carolina. And then Zamarian Lang, regarded as the 93rd top wide receiver in the nation by On3, 6'3", 170 pounds. I'm sure he's put a little bit of weight on since the last recorded weight was given to On3. But he's got size, he has length, he has speed. He is part of the class of 2024. So adding those people in there into the mix, that's just kind of what your wide receiver room's looking like. So it's talented. It's very, very young, as I've mentioned before. Putting Brown to the side, putting McGowan to the side. Luke Doty is your most productive wide receiver from 2023. And with all due respect, Luke, I'm laughing a little bit, but I think you can understand why. You did some real good things at wide receiver, but he had 13 receptions last year. You're looking to be able to find someone that can be that number one guy. I don't know if Nicholas Harbor is ready to be the number one yet. I still think he's growing just based off of what we saw from this past year. And again, we keep reminding people, he's making the jump still from tight end / DN to wide receiver.
Sprinter.
So, it's going to take some time. So if he isn't the number one guy next year, and I don't know, and I know people keep asking, Patrick, we talked about Juice earlier, I'll say it again for just people that are just hopping on right now. It is, door is shut, but it's not locked. But I don't see things changing. There. I think really more than anything, you could be looking at a situation where Brown, the transfer from Coastal, is competing for that number one spot. So, how do I feel about that? I mean, I think it's easy to just be like, well, on paper, like, the guy's coming from Coastal. Well, then again, and Juice had more hype. No disrespect to Brown. He had more hype coming out of James Madison, despite the fact they were still FCS. But talking to someone who has had the opportunity to be around Brown a lot, talking with him yesterday, they said Brown is the type of player that can just go off at any given time. And they said based off of the things they know about the young man, being around him as much as he has as a coach, he said he's more than capable of playing at this level. So it's not – I remember when Juice arrived at South Carolina, I remember talking to a coach that had to play against him, had a game plan against him, and I put the message out on Gamecock Central. I think I put it out on Twitter too. And it was the direct text message, and it was just like, this dude is a baller. Like, it doesn't matter what down it is. It could be third down. Everyone in the stadium, including everyone's freaking parents in the stand, everyone knows the ball's going to Juice. Juice is going to make it happen. Not exactly the same situation with a guy like this, just a little bit different skill set. But from talking to this coach, a coach who I respect tremendously and have known for about a decade now, this is the type of guy that I think South Carolina fans are going to really enjoy. I mentioned it earlier in the week. I mentioned it in the breakdown video. But from what I've seen on tape going back to last year in 2022, it reminds me from just how they use him. I'm not trying to say from a body standpoint, all that. It reminded me of Deebo Samuel in terms of what we saw with South Carolina. He's someone that they use in motions, the pistol formation as a running back as well. You can move him around a lot. So very interested to see how things are going to play out.
Yeah, absolutely. Ani asks, any news on Overton? And we appreciate the donation, the super comment, if you will.
Yeah, thank you for the donation. I mean, as of right now, there's nothing, I wouldn't say there's anything new to share. I think what South Carolina is doing right now is, again, I mentioned this before, they're in the mix. They're in the hunt, right? You see the graphics watching NFL games, right? You see on the side, they're in the hunt. That's where South Carolina is right now. They're in the hunt. And I don't want to make it seem like South Carolina doesn't have a chance, because I really feel like they do. I do think, though, there's going to be, I think it's going to be interesting to see how things play out simply because of his brother. And I think it's pronounced Micaiah, if I'm saying that correctly.
Yeah.
So, again, that's one thing that I've been told, that they would like to play at the same school together. Does that mean that will happen? No, doesn't mean that will necessarily happen. For those of you who don't know who Micaiah Overton is, outside of the fact that it's his brother, he was someone that really didn't play that much at Texas A&M. I think he only saw the field actually once last season against Louisiana Monroe. But that's one thing that I've been hearing. So, we'll keep an eye on that.
Yeah, definitely. It's still
Joe,
evolving, as we know.
Joe, typically when we have these live shows, and
Yeah.
as you can see with the numbers being high, I just usually keep going
Yeah.
until these numbers drop underneath 300 live viewers. I don't know if that's going to happen anytime soon right now. We might have to wrap things up shortly, but at the same time too, it's hard to do that when you have all these people on. We don't want to let people down here, but I'm trying to just figure out anything additional that we can talk about right now that we haven't hit on that would be beneficial for the viewers. We talked about the Juice Wells situation. We've talked about the running back situation. We've talked about receivers. We've gone down that list. Talked about the offensive line. Talked about the defensive line. One thing that we can talk about, and this was something I wanted to mention earlier, but I didn't want to spend a lot of time on. South Carolina has 4 coaches whose contracts are set to expire at the end of the month. So that would, of course, be the calendar year. What that means is if South Carolina is going to retain those coaches, there's going to have to be a board of trustees meeting and contracts are going to have to get approved. Now, this is not Mike saying these coaches are not coming back. This is me saying these are the coaches whose contracts are set to expire at the end of the year. Those coaches, including strength and conditioning coach Luedecke, those contracts are strength and conditioning coach Luedecke, tight end coach Jody Wright, wide receiver coach Justin Stepp, and Travian Robinson, defensive line coach, which was, I think, a surprise to some people simply because he joined the staff last year. It was just a 1-year deal, though. So those contracts, if all 4 or if some will be back, they're going to have to get those approved. Running back coach Montario Hardesty, his contract expires in 2024. Again, all these contracts, they are calendar year, so it wouldn't expire until the end of 2024. Whether it be a coach that wants to leave here on his own, right? Whether it might have an opportunity elsewhere or South Carolina decides to move on from them. The way these contracts are written, it has the same payout that you would have to do. It's like one way or the other, right? So for example, if a coach gets fired and the contract is $200,000 left for, say, for 1 year, right? Then you'd have to pay that coach $200,000. If that coach were to leave on his own, go to another school, or decides to step down at South Carolina, unless there's some type of mutual agreement, then that coach is going to have to pay the university $200,000. Again, I'm just using a round number here. Could be any coach for that matter. So these are some things to keep in mind. Clayton White's contract expires at the end of 2025. So I'm not saying that some of these coaches are going to be gone. I do think there will be some type of changes, though, in the next couple weeks. The problem is when you're talking about just changes to the coaching staff, one of the challenges is the fact that you have everything happening as quickly as it does now because of the transfer portal, right? The fact that you have early signing day now, and you have that right before Christmas. Yeah, South Carolina isn't, and Henry, I'll get that for you. If Joe, if you want to drop a link for the Garnet Trust for Henry.
Yeah, I got you.
Henry was asking, just put in the comment section for Henry. But you're not playing in a bowl game. You don't have to prepare for that. So again, in a perfect world, you'd love to be practicing so that you can have an opportunity to get 15 extra practices in. A guy like Dante Reno, as Reno's told Gamecock Central, as I see the word Garnet Trust pop up, he's told Gamecock Central that he would have done the practices in the bowl game if South Carolina was in a bowl. But didn't happen. So we'll see. We'll see how some of those things go.
Talk about, Mike.
You're dealing with
schedule release. Schedule release and Malik Murphy too, I guess.
Yeah, I mean the schedule. Look, Joe,
we kind of knew already. Yeah.
Well, and let me ask you this: and if anyone wants to be a wise guy, this is your time to be a wise guy. Okay. the people, and I'm not saying everyone's doing this, it just feels like the people that always pound their chest the loudest, saying SEC, SEC, SEC. It seems like you always have a portion of that fan base that is always the first ones to gripe when the schedule comes out. Now, obviously, with this, we knew who South Carolina was going to play. We just didn't know the dates, right? It's a little bit different. But I say that because, thank you, Henry.
Shout out to
What
Henry.
hat
Yeah.
is that? Is that I didn't know if that was a Pirates hat or not. I don't think that is. Probably like a high schooler or something like that, or a smaller college. Amherst, there we go. All right.
There we go.
So I say that because with Texas and Oklahoma coming to the SEC, no divisions anymore. Outside of the non-conference games, what would you, and again, this is your chance to be a wise guy. I'm asking people out there. What would be your perfect, ideal schedule for South Carolina for next year? Talking about matchups. So I bring that up because I feel like even if you want to make an easy schedule for South Carolina, it's impossible. It's impossible to, right? You're not Alabama. You're not Georgia. You're South Carolina. You're a team that's trying to climb to get into that middle of the pack and continue to take steps forward. When you look at the conference as a whole, that's where I put South Carolina, probably just under the middle of the pack. But I bring that up simply because that's just the reality of it. That's just the reality of it. So, Joe, you tell me. You try to give me some type of easy schedule, and I'm not even asking about the dates, right? Like this game, this date. I mean, that plays a role of it, but
Yeah.
I don't understand how anyone could get upset with the schedule. I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah. No, I think Henry's hitting it on the head. It's impossible for anyone in the SEC to now have an easy schedule. You maybe switch Texas and Oklahoma. That's even harder. Texas made the playoff. Like
Vandy 11 times.
I like that. I like that. That's good. That's good. Yeah. And then Clemson line. I like those. Those are good. But other than that, like I don't know. And maybe Vandy gives you a game at least one of those 11 or one of the 11 times, right? Like they're still on the come up. Clark Lee is doing some good things there, right? So I don't know. I mean, I agree with that. Like everyone in the comments right now get it. Like they get it. Like you can't really have a very easy schedule in the SEC.
No, you can't. You can't. But I mean, that's just again.
Ryan asked about Malik Murphy.
So it's funny that we've been talking about Malik Murphy because there's a lot going on today, and you're trying to stay updated as far as some of these guys who South Carolina has been landing today that we're just waiting to officially announce. Trying to move around in my notes here because my notes are just all over the place simply because it's been that kind of week. I got to remind myself that it's only friggin' Thursday today. Let me get my notes for Malik. Where's my notes for Malik? Joe, do you have any thoughts as I try to find my notes for him real quick?
Murphy, I mean, not necessarily. You talked about bringing in a guy that's going to play quarterback. The question would be, do you see him as a starter or do you not? That's always going to be the question with a transfer portal quarterback. Do you want that guy to go win the job? And I don't think they necessarily do. You would want Lenore Sellers to win the job. So, AJ Swan, I believe, is the other quarterback's name that he committed, right? Or was he just on a visit?
He was on a visit.
Okay, yeah.
He was on a visit. That is not official. He's not publicly announced anything. I'll say this though about Malik Murphy. We talked about this a little bit on Tuesday, and it's going to upset some people. But then again, sometimes you just got to be, be honest. If you bring in Malik Murphy, you bring in whoever, right? Even if you feel like Sellers is the guy. Worst case scenario, right? Worst case scenario is you bring him in and you find out that Sellers or Reno, whoever, they're just not ready yet. And then, of course, they could possibly leave. Now, that is the worst case scenario, right? Having said that, though, in the event that South Carolina, no, intern Joe didn't spill the beans.
I did not.
I promise.
I'll
say this.
Whether or
I'll
not
say this.
was public yet or not. So
I'll say this. Of the 2 welcome homes today, he's not one of them. If anything changes, we'll have a video ready to go, but he's not one of them. So spoiler alert. But in the event that you bring a quarterback in and they were to beat out Sellers, Reno, I understand there would be a large portion of this fan base that would be upset. But again, what would you rather have? Would you rather have someone that comes in here and is ready to go? If, again, this is just hypothetically speaking, you bring a guy in and he beats out one of your quarterbacks, that just means he's not ready. He's not ready to go. So it's a difficult road to navigate through because, as we mentioned before, there's always the possibility that someone could enter the portal at any given time. But I think with the way that college football is, if you're a coach, right, we talk about loyalty, it's very difficult to have really any loyalty these days. And I'm not even talking about South Carolina. Beamer's a very loyal man. But I also think, too, you realize all it takes is one phone call, as we saw with several players. And by the way, Mitch Jeter announced today that he's going to be kicking for Notre Dame next year. You have to do what's in the best interest of you. So if you bring a quarterback in here, and we mentioned this on Tuesday, again, this is just hypothetically speaking, not saying that this is how Sellers or Reno feels or they're thinking, but if it bothers you that they bring in an experienced quarterback, then you're at the wrong place. I mean, this is the SEC. This is the best of the best. All right? Go to an FCS school, go to a D2 school, go somewhere else if you don't embrace competition. And again, that's not saying Sellers doesn't. That's not saying that Reno doesn't. That's not saying Luke Doty doesn't. If Luke Doty were to be the guy and they need to compete. You need guys, though, that are ready to go in that room. You need to. It's going to be a very young room next year. Very young room. So whatever you can do to push guys in that room, to push Reno, to push Sellers, you do whatever you can. And it's not true apples to apples, as I always like to say. But think back. Think back to the Ryan Hilinski era. Ryan Hilinski was thrown into the mix because Jake Bentley went down. What happens the following year? Hilinski thinks he's going to be the guy. And there were things going on that told the coaching staff, told guys like Connor Shaw even, that he wasn't. And I'm not even strictly talking about performance-based. So I say those things because you need to have a guy that can challenge someone because you don't want anyone to get comfortable at any position, but especially in that quarterback room when you have younger guys. So, look, you're going to have to bring someone into that quarterback room, regardless of how things play out. Even if we all sit here today and we all feel like, all right, Sellers is going to be the week 1 guy. If you bring someone in and he's not responding the way, and again, we're just sake of conversation, not saying that this will be the case, or will be this, as a fact, but you need people to push him. You need people to push Reno. You can't let anyone get comfortable in that room. Can't just have it.
Yeah.
All right, Joe. What else? We're going to wrap things up.
Yeah. There was one more question from Travis. Mike, is Shepard to Columbia heating up, or does he seem to be a prime time lock?
We're still monitoring that situation. And I think, again, I mentioned this before with a couple players. Things can change. Things can change overnight with just one phone call. So even though if you asked me today, I would say it's leaning towards Colorado. I'm not going to rule South Carolina out. So that's kind of the way I would go about it. It's not a done deal, right? Things aren't done yet, but South Carolina certainly they're not I wouldn't say they're the horse in front right now. Someone brings this up. I'm probably going to pronounce this wrong. Sarsim's Sarah Sam's 552 says, I still never would have started Colin Hill over Helinski. In the moment, I agreed with you 1,000%. I agree. But you hear some of the things that took place as to why South Carolina didn't feel comfortable with Helinski in there. It wasn't just performance-based. Certain things that you look for in a leader that they didn't feel comfortable with. So, that's kind of to close
everything, Mike, man.
close
That's
a
crazy.
book on that chapter. But
yeah, 1 hour and 54 minutes this afternoon.
Woo! Jay Diz says the SEC is no joke. Sellers got hurt this past season, and the little bit he played, Rattler playing all year, was a freak of nature. So yeah, and again, I only bring up Helinski. I love the family. They were very nice to me, but we get paid to talk about sports, and I'm not gonna sugarcoat stuff. I'm gonna be honest. There were certain things that the coaches were looking for from him that they didn't feel like he was doing. So I bring that up because, again, not saying that Sellers thinks the same way, does the same things or anything like that. Not talking about a talent standpoint. There's certain things, though, that you want to just make sure. And having seen some of this during my short time, and I say short, we'll be going on 9 years of covering South Carolina and a decade of the SEC, going back to my days in Mississippi next season. That, you just want to make sure that these guys are getting pushed. Someone says, seems Jeter did commit to Notre Dame. That is right. Mitch Jeter did commit to Notre Dame. He announced that earlier today. I actually had a chance to speak with Mitch. He's excited for the opportunity because, and we've talked about it on Gamecock Central, it wasn't an NIL thing. He was a grad student, had an opportunity to go do something a little different. He did his time here, which makes it sound more like he was in the friggin' clink. That's not the way I'm phrasing it, but he did his time in South Carolina, and he wanted an opportunity to do something different as a grad transfer. So best of luck to Mitch. Did some good things at South Carolina, good kid. But the Mitch Jeter era is over at South Carolina. The Mason Love era will soon begin. And you also have a very, very hungry kicker in Alex Herrera. Going to be back. And we've had more Juice Wells comments today. Brian, I'm going to give you a heads up. You or anyone else that has questions about Juice Wells or any of the things really with Gamecock football, you can go back to the YouTube page for Gamecock Central and listen to it all. You know why? Because we have 2 hours of today's program. We talked a lot about Juice, talked about pretty much everything under the sun with Gamecock football today. Go subscribe for free on the YouTube page. If you haven't, go on over to the Gamecock Central Podcast Network, where you can find this episode in podcast form. If you're taking a long drive, you'll be able to find it. And as always, today's show is brought to you by our good friends over at Movement Mortgage. Clint Hammond. If you're going out there trying to find a home right now, the lowest rate on the market, it's not necessarily easy to do. But like our very own Wes Mitchell found out, as well as Perry Orth, when they both were looking for a new home, what do? They gave Clint a call, found the lowest rates, and they were able to find some nice houses. Give them a call at 803-771-6933. And today's show is also brought to you by our good friends over at Liberty Tax. Joe, tax season, it's right around the corner. It's crazy to think that we only have a couple more weeks until 2023 is bye-bye. And before you know it, you're going to have to get your taxes in order. You're going to have to go back, try to find some of that documents and paperwork, and it can be a friggin' hassle. Well, guess what? You still have some time to, as I would like to say, preparation is separation. Give Liberty Tax a call. They'll be able to prepare you to make this tax season much easier for you. That number is 803-462-5576. Give Liberty Tax a call so you can overcome taxiety this tax season. Woo! What a show. And thanks, intern Joe, for hopping on.
Yeah, anytime, Mike. I mean, it's portal season. We're always on call. We're at Gamecock Central. We're always on top of things. So, yeah, happy to hop on and help out wherever need be.
Real quick, because I saw this earlier, and we'll leave things off on this note, and this will be how we end the show. So as I mentioned before, I drove up to James Madison on Tuesday, excuse me. So it's about a 6-hour drive when you have to stop for some gas, right? Might hit a little traffic. So 6 hours, then I'm driving back. So I left probably around, I don't know, 6:30 in the morning. I'm there for about 3 hours to see, my old college coach get introduced as the new Duke's head coach. And then I drive on back. So I'm driving back, and Chris Clark gives me a call. And he says, hey, Rocket Sanders, it could be happening tonight. Could be happening tonight. How far away are you from home? Because he knows I'm driving back. And it's like, I don't know, like 10 o'clock at night, whatever time it was. And I'm like, shoot. I'm like, I don't know, or 9:30, whatever the case was. And I said, I'm an hour away. I said, I'm like in Rock Hill. So I pulled over. I found a McDonald's parking lot. I don't know if we're ever going to release the full tape because we didn't need to, because Juice didn't make it official. It's not Juice. Rocket, as I see the word Juice on the side, Rocket didn't make the announcement that night, but I went to McDonald's parking lot. And the reason I went to McDonald's, I think back to my days of covering high school football at ESPNBoston.com. And McDonald's was always the place that had the most reliable Wi-Fi at that time of the night. So, I went inside until we got kicked out. Ironically, I didn't order anything other than a water. I had one of those, because I haven't been to McDonald's in forever. I just don't eat McDonald's. They had one of those like machines that you had to friggin' press to order things. And I mean, goodness, you want to talk about feeling old. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I'm trying to friggin' get this thing. It says needs this code number. I'm like, I just want a friggin' water. So got the water. I saw someone next to me. They had like a McFlurry or something. I think that's the first time I've ever actually seen someone get like an ice. Yeah, I guess the ice cream machine was actually working. So shout out to the people at Rock Hill. But anyway, went out in the parking lot, recorded all that. But as that's going on, the Oscar Attaway commitment broke. So fortunately, I was already pulled over and we were able to upload that video that was already pre-taped, because we pre-tape a lot of these videos in advance, but some of them will happen, of course, on the fly. Like the Rocket one, we were told like there was a chance that it was going to happen earlier in the week. It didn't. So we're trying to be timely with how we word things in our stories. So yeah, I probably got back around, 2 a.m. Went to sleep probably around 2:30, and then woke back up around, 6:30 when we got the news that Rocket was expected to commit to South Carolina. Got that video up, ready to go. And then, of course, last night, Rocket comes out and says it, and shoot, yesterday, and even going back to Monday, I mean, it's just been insane with the number of players that have committed. So that's the McDonald's story. I share that because Alyssa Lang, she poked fun at it today when we were on Sirius XM SEC radio with her and Chris Doran. So, yep. Shout out to the Rock Hill McDonald's. And some people are like, why don't you go to Bojangles? My contract's up with Bo's, I guess you could say I've entered the transfer portal when it comes to
fast food there, Biscuit
fried,
Boy.
fried chicken. Yeah, I'm taking. I don't know. It was my unofficial visit to McDonald's.
Somebody call Zestos. Get this man a deal, man.
I want to go check out Bernie's. I've never had Bernie's. I'm like,
Bernie's is good.
I'm disappointed to admit I've never been to Bernie's, so I got to change that.
Drake's Duckin's fantastic, and so is Lizard's Thicket. Jamie Shaw is a big Lizard's Thicket guy. I had it finally, and it's unbelievable.
I like Lizard's Thicket's breakfast. Get the French toast.
I've never had their breakfast. I gotta get
good French toast. Big French toast.
Good restaurant in general. Good fixings.
We're gonna wrap things up. We appreciate. Someone said no Buc-ee's on the way up north. I know.
I will be stopping on my way up through Spartanburg, wherever the one is in South Carolina.
I love Buc-ee's. I love Buc-ee's.
I'll be getting some Christmas presents at Buc-ee's, because what can't you buy at Buc-ee's?
You can buy everything at Buc-ee's. Again, guys, if you missed any of our show, over 2 hours of content today. I mean, the number of people watching still is very high. So we appreciate everyone that tuned in today. Again, head on over to the YouTube page. You can watch this show in its entirety. When I say we hit on everything, I mean, shoot, I don't think there's anything that we missed today. Head on over there. Go back on to the podcast platform. We're going to upload this shortly. You're going to be able to hear everything. Here's what I'll say, though. Go do that sooner rather than later, because what's going to happen is, and it could happen today, we still have 2 welcome homes that are floating around that Shane Beamer posted at this afternoon. But everything this transfer portal offseason, as you guys have seen, everything is constantly changing as far as, what's going on with this, what's going on with that. So when I say this, I mean it. If you are a diehard Gamecock fan, or you're just someone that enjoys following all the portal stuff, take advantage of signing up for Gamecock Central today. $1 for the first month. Half off for the year. We have some great specials right now. Maybe a loved one or a friend, you're trying to figure out what a good present would be for Christmas. I promise you, this is something that a lot of people would enjoy. And I'm not just saying that because I work over there. This has been awesome since I joined Gamecock Central 2 years ago. It's a mini community within a community. Really neat.
Okay.
And then it's like kind of like going to the Christmas dinner. You might have your crazy uncle at the table. You might deal with that a little bit, but it comes from a good heart, right? Comes from a good place, good heart. It's a lot of fun. Head on over. You'll be able to get the inside scoops between myself, Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark, and everything else in between. We're talking basketball news, women's, men's. Joe does the show during the week. There's so much going on, but the Insiders Forum, that's where all the heavy stuff is. That's where it all is. So we shared a lot right here, but there's even more that we didn't even talk about, that we don't talk about here. And we do that for a reason, because we want to give back to the subscribers. And the number of subscribers since the month of December, it has been through the roof. So thank you. And someone just said, I was just about to ask about that. I'm signing up now. Appreciate you, man. We appreciate you. Because here's the thing. It might not be for you, right? You head on over, Gamecock Central, I know this isn't part of like the pitch they tell us when we go out there and sell the product. I'm just being honest, and you guys have been able to get to know me over the years during my time in South Carolina. I'm not going to BS you. It might not be for everybody. That's all right. But for $1 for the first month, I mean, what's the worst thing that happens? You go in there, it's not for you. You can cancel on any given time. But what happens more times than not, you're going to go in, you're going to enjoy it, especially right now. So with early signing day coming up next week, intern Joe and I, we're going to have a big show on Tuesday. We'll get you squared away as far as who to expect to see South Carolina sign on next Wednesday for early signing day, as well as who's going to be some of the early enrollees. We'll also recap any transfer portal news, because I have a feeling, right, we see the 2 welcome homes now. I have a feeling that number could get up to 5, right? The 2 today, and then some like 3 additional ones by next Tuesday, based on some of the things I've been told. So buckle up. Again, appreciate everyone that tuned in. Appreciate Chuck. Appreciate Chuck. He's been a GC Central.
Let's go, Chuck.
Member since 2007. Appreciate that. Appreciate intern Joe hopping on today too. This was a last minute thing for Joe, in case anything happened. What a show. What a show over 2 hours. Everyone enjoy the rest of your Thursday night. If you see me around town, I'll try my best to stay awake. But more times than not, I'll probably be just looking at my phone, waiting for the next welcome home, just like all of you. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Stay tuned to Gamecock Central for the latest as we continue to navigate through off-season mode for the Gamecocks together.